Wise now. Your own psukim. And Rav said, you're doilig. So for the first aliyah, you read 3 psukim, and then for the second aliyah, you go back one, like we do in Rosh Chodesh. So apparently you must pass on like Rav. The reason why Shmuel doesn't like Rav's approach is because that means if you're there for the first aliyah and you hear them laying 3 psukim, and then you have to leave, so you're not there for Levi, you're assuming that for Levi, they only read 2 psukim. On the other hand, if someone came late and he only makes it for Levi, and he sees that for Levi they started from the 3rd pasuk, so he makes an assumption that Kohen only had 2 psukim, and that would mislead people into thinking that you're allowed to make an aliyah with only 2 psukim. And the Gemara says, if you could just lane more into the next parsha, then that's the way to go. But if you can't, then you have to use the method of doilig of Rav. Okay, so let's see the Gemara back there. Parsha gedoyla karinoisa b'shnayim. When there are 2 parshas to lane, like in every day of the Maluim, so the larger of the 2, you'll make it for 2 aliyahs, and the smaller of the 2, you'll have 1 aliyah. B'shachris u'v'musaf. So the way I touched this in the Mishnah was b'shachris u'v'musaf, they lane out of a Sefer Torah, u'v'mincha karin al piyan. But that's not poshut, because if you read the Lashon itself, it's not quite clear if mincha is connected to shachris, musaf, and mincha, shachris and musaf, or if mincha, if there's a comma after musaf, and mincha is different. So the Gemara here drills down. Ibaylahu, heichi kamer. What exactly does the Tana mean to say? Is it b'shachris u'v'musaf karin oisa b'sefer? Shachris and musaf, they learn it from a Sefer Torah. U'v'mincha karin oisa al peh. And by mincha, they just read it Baal Peh, Kekarin Eshema, like they're reading Krishma, Oidilma, or maybe Hachikatani, B'Shachrin Kairin Oisa B'Sefer, by Shachris only do they learn it from a Sefer, and Uva Mincha, Kairin Oisa Al Peh, Kekarin Eshema. So the question is really where to put the comma. Tashma, the Tanya, we have a brayso that's very explicit. And the brayso says, B'Shachris, Uva Musaf, Nichnasim Leves Knesses, the Kairin, Kederach Shekarin Kol Hashana, by Shachas and Musaf, they lane normally, Ubemincha Yochid Kair Ois Al Peh, which is how we touched in the Mishnah, because we had the benefit of our scroll teaching us what the Gemara said later, or even of Rashi. Zog to Gemara Vater, Amr Rabbi Yosy, good morning. Yochid Yochel Likrois Divrei Torah Al Peh B'Tzibur. Can a Yochid read the Torah Al Peh? Don't we say that Dvarim Shebiksav, you're not supposed to read Baal Peh. Elakulon nichnosin b'karin ois al peh k'karin hashema. So this is very interesting, because what does it help if everyone reads it, if everyone doesn't read it? So the halacha is that if it's something that very sugar b'piv, that everybody knows, there you're allowed to say those things Baal Peh. The question here was not Dvarim Shebiksav, you're not allowed to learn them Baal Peh. The question is v'chiyachid yachol likros Divrei Torah al peh b'tzibur. Do you ever have a public reading of Torah that's not done through a Sefer Torah? Of course not. So therefore, the Gemara concludes, similar to the way we do the Haftarah. Everybody reads it for themselves, because we don't have someone laning it from the cloud. Gewaltig. Let's see the Gemara weiter. Kol yoim sheyesh by halal, ein boy maimed. Any day where there's halal, there's no maimed. Okay. Zok Gemara, ma hefresh ben zelasa. So let's have a look. Zok Rashi, ma hefresh ben zelasa. Maishna the carbon atom dachi maimed din ila umaimed the mincha dachi. So let's go back to the Mishnah, where the Mishnah discusses the difference between a day of Musaf and a day of carbon eitzim. So I'm going to go back to Daf Chavav Mar Aleph, which is the Mishnah, and the Mishnah says over here. Kol yom sheish b'hal ein b'mayvet b'shachos. Carbon musaf. Any day that has a carbon musaf, ein b'neila, there will not be a carbon. There will not be my mother's by neila, and carbon eitzim ein b'mincha. So the question is, why is it that the carbon musaf and the carbon eitzim are different? So let's see Rashi. Ma'avrish b'zelazeh ma'ishna the carbon eitzim dochi may be the neila. Why is it that carbon eitzim is doicha the maimed of neila, but it's not doicha the maimed of mincha? We're on Daf Chof Ches Amud Aleph, and we're at the two dots. That's about 20 lines down. So Tosfos explains. So ma'havish bin carbon musaf the carbon eitzim, the carbon musaf doicha mincha, the carbon musaf doicha mincha, the carbon eitzim loy doicha mincha. So the carbon eitzim is not doicha mincha, and the carbon eitzim is doicha mincha. Meaning they don't do my modosh, they don't do the laning and the they don't lane by mincha.
They have a carbon. They don't.
Since they're busy.
Oh, these kahanim.
The Israeli kahanim will be Yisrael. Since they're busy, kahanim will be margul avodah. But the Israelim that are standing by the carbon and davening, they don't do that on a day with his musaf or mincha because it's too busy. So let me just look inside again. Kol yom sheish b'halo, ein b'mayim b'shachas carbon musaf, ein b'neila, and carbon eitzim ein b'mincha. So carbon eitzim is doicha mincha and not neila. Carbon musaf is doicha neila as well as mincha, I believe. Mincha, and here it's saying it's doicha neila and not mincha. So it must be the second sheet. Amal v'naza kacha yibshu shoyna carbon musaf. So it's going on the second sheet of Benazai, which is what Rabbi Kiva was murdered to anyway. So the Nachama, if there's a carbon musaf, there's no mincha, there's no my mother's by mincha, there's carbon eitzim, there's no by neila, there's no my mother's by neila. And that the Gemara asks, why is it that carbon eitzim is doichi neila, but it's not doicha mincha, going according to the second version we had in the Mishnah from Benazai. So Zok the Gemara. Dr. Gemara, Mahavish ben Zelas, Dr. Gemara, halalu divrei Torah, halalu divrei sefer. And there's two pshatim in what this means. So let's see Rashi first. Halalu divrei Torah, mincha. Mincha is a tefillah that's midaraisa, with its mamish deraisa, or it's mentioned in the Torah. Kidamina bebrachas Yitzchak Avinu tikein tefillas mincha, shenemar vayetze Yitzchak lasuach basada lefnei serev. U'deneila and mincha, the tefillah of neila is midivrei sefer. We don't say it's because Adar, but we're saying since mincha is deraisa, it's less easy, or it takes more to be mevatel. So therefore, carbon eitzim will be doichet the maimed in the ila, because nila is only at the kind of abundant type of tefillah. But mincha, although it's not a mitzvah deraisa, but mincha was established in the Torah, it was established by Yitzchak. So therefore, the carbon eitzim will only be able to be doichet neila, but it will not be able to be doichet mincha. That's Rashi's pshat. Tosfos has a different perspective. Tosfos halol divrei Torah, musaf. The carbon musaf is a deraisa. So we're not looking at the nitcha. According to Rashi, we're looking at the nitcha. The thing that was pushed away, mincha doesn't get pushed away so easily because it's as a makarmi deraisa, but neila gets pushed away much more easily because it's at the kind of derabban. According to Tosfos, we're looking at the doicha. So halol divrei Torah, musaf, the carbon musaf is a mitzvah deraisa. Ulahachi kadachi mincha. That's why every day there's a musaf, it'll be doicha mincha, and of course it'll be doicha neil as well. About carbon eitzim, this whole idea of carbon eitzim was established by the Nevi'im when the people donated wood. So therefore, the carbon eitzim isn't such a severe thing. It's not such an important thing. Therefore, it'll only be able to overrule Ne'ilah, which is only Midivir Siphon, but carbonation cannot be Doicha Mincha, Midivir Torah, because Mincha is Midivir Torah. So, according to Rashi, we're looking at the Nitche, that the Rashi we won't push away, the Nitche that the Rabban won't push away. According to Tosfos, we're looking at the Doicha. Okay, so the Heilige Gemara weiter. Zman Atei Kahanim V'ha. So we're talking about the different days that the people brought their karbanos eitim. Morning. So we're on Daf Chav Ches on the base. Chav Ches on Aleph. We're about 15 lines from the top. Tana Rabbanim. Lama Hotrichu Loimar Zman Atei Kahanim V'ha. Why did the Mishnah need to list these off? Zok the Gemara. Amru, they said, Kisha Olu B'nei Agayla, when the people came up from Golos after 70 years in Golos Bavel, and they came up to reestablish the Beis Hamikdash, Loi Matu Eitzim Belishka. You can unplug it. Loi Matu Eitzim Belishka. They were not able to find wood. They didn't have wood to do their karbanos with. They did not have wood to do their karbanos with. The Amdu Elu, and these generous families got up, the Hisnadvu Mishalahem, and they gave from wood that they had, and that because of that generosity, so the Nevi'im amongst them made a Tanai that since these people, when we needed the wood most, they came up with the wood, they sacrificed to give us the wood that they needed, they'll always have that source.
What do you want me to insinuate when motivate? Did they expect to find ready-made wood after 70 years of
no, they couldn't acquire. They weren't able to acquire wood. Lumber was scarce.
Low multi means they weren't able to buy?
No.
Why do you say low multi? The only type of low multi?
Well, of course, it doesn't mean that they didn't find it. No one prepared it. How could someone find it? Like what you asked. So obviously, it means they didn't. Wood was scarce, and they didn't have enough wood supply to service the needs of the Beis Hamikdash. In today's world, we could understand what it means to have supply chain issues, and lumber is almost double, right? Since the beginning of COVID. So Zok the Gemara. So they made a tonight. Shafil Lishka Malaya Eitzim. Even if the Beis Hamikdash has a nice, healthy supply of wood, you Elu Misnav Mishalem, they should have the schus to bring wood. Shenemar by Gairolis Ipalnu al Karbon Eitz. Achahanim Alavim Ba'am. Lahavi Levesa Lakenu, Levesa Visenu, Leitim Izumanim, they should bring it to the Beis Hamikdash, to the house of our fathers, on pre-scheduled dates, Shana B'Shana, year after year. In other words, they have that date every year. Levair al Mizbach Hashem Lakenu, to burn on the Mizbech, Kakasa B'Torah. Developed it. Rashi Amdu Elu. So Rashi says Zman. The Gemara's question was, what does it mean Zman Atek Kahanim Ba'am? The time of these Kahanim. What does that mean? So under the Zman de Katani b'Misnisim, the word Zman Atzak Kahanim, that it says in the Mishnah, Ahachi Putzruchu L'Nois. The reason why it had to be listed off is Mishmahita Kana the Obed Luhan Nachnavim. It's those days that the Nevi'im were masakin based on how the Gemara elaborates. Why? Ki Hechi Deloy Litchini Me'asrai. The Nevi'im had to put those days in place and crystallize them in place so that in the future these families would never lose their schus, their right to bring the carbon eitim on those days. Okay, let's see the Gemara right. V'mayim kahanim levim v'chomi, and anyone else who didn't know which mishmar they were in, so they all went on that day. Now, we also learned that there were two families that had a very, very interesting name. There was the Bnei Goin ve'Eli, the people who still stole pestles. Description of a pharmacist. There's the thick bowl, and it's like a little bit, it's like a miniature baseball bat that they use to crush the spices or whatever it is that they have in there. Okay, so that they're called Bnei Goin ve'Eli, the people who stole these mortars, Ubnei Koitzik, and the people who cut, the cutters. So we didn't know what that meant. It was referring to one family. What does that mean? So we're going to see the heroic efforts. Let me ask you a question before we start this Gemara. If the government is making impossible restrictions For instance, they're saying that you have to vaccinate everybody in a school or else the school is to shut down, like they just made in New York. And there's many schools that are fighting it because it's going to cause a lot of issues with having teachers there. So if the government backs you into a corner and is violating your religious rights, are you allowed to forge vaccine certificates to be able to keep your teachers and your students in school and not to circumvent the unlawful or the immoral or the unjust shutting down of schools because of vaccines? Because of vaccines back.
Not if you're a Belzer.
That was a loaded question. I can get thrown right off of YouTube for this. What? So, but that's what I'm trying to do. But that's the shaila. What if maybe vaccines, is too much of a charged subject? But what if there's something that the government's doing that's wrong, and it's going to impact Yiddishkeit? Are we allowed to lie to get around it? Like, for instance, what happens if we're in the middle of the forest because the goyim think not allowed in the Torah, and the soldiers come and we quickly pull out our dreidels and they say, "What are you doing?" "Oh, we're playing dreidel." Was that not a lie? So you see, sometimes when the government is doing things that are unjust, you're allowed to use alternative means with which to circumvent them. Yeah, that's one opinion. I understand, but I understand. I understand. But we don't know. Again, I'm not a doctor. I just know that it's a very controversial issue.
Finish. You open the words.
Basically, what you're suggesting is that we are specifically picking on the Jews.
No, I'm not. I'm not saying that at all. It's Christian schools. It's Muslim
See,
schools.
this must be a very fast daf because you just threw the brakes on it here.
I got derailed. I was just trying to wake up the island, and now I woke him up. But I'm not woke. I put a twist on it. So I'm manipulating the facts to make it look. That's exactly what I'm doing. Right.
Clearly, Matzyahu says you can go to war. So what's the shaila? Zoom is censoring you. Zoom is censoring you.
I'm for sure going to get censored now. So let's
You keep losing your audio.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, but whenever you talk about something controversial, it just disappears.
Oh, so maybe it's built in as a protection. Okay. So Zok the Gemara. Amru, Pamachas. I wasn't trying to wade into such a hot political subject, but I'm happy that I got here by mistake. Pamachas Gozra Hamalchus Gzeir al Yisrael. Once upon a time, Malchus was Gozra Gzeir on Klal Yisrael. Shelo Yaviu Eitzim L'Maracha. You're not allowed to bring wood to the Maracha because it might spread COVID. V'shelo Yaviu Bikurim L'Yerushalayim. You're not allowed to bring Bikurim L'Yerushalayim because it might spread COVID. Now we're laughing, but the Rishonim tell us that I'm blowing things out of proportion to get under Dr. Goltar's skin.
Can't hear you again, yes.
One second. Who is censoring?
I'm sorry?
No, it keeps cutting out.
Yeah.
Audio. Ever since Akiva hooked up the big screen, you keep cutting out.
I should move this to the other side? Okay. Okay. Anyway, hopefully it'll be a little bit better now. So what happened was, okay, let me know if it cuts off again. I want you to know it's not just cutting off the audio on Zoom, it's cutting off the audio in the room too. They can't hear me for those seconds either. So I'm not sure who's pushing these buttons over here. So anyway, oh, it says your internet connection is unstable. That explains not. Okay, I thought I was unstable. Maybe it's both. Anyway, so they do it under the pretext. That there's a good reason for it, such as wood is scarce, it's ruining resources, or if you're taking all these pears to Yerushalayim, it's going to raise the price of pears everywhere else. So they did it with a pretext that it's good for the economy. similar to the things they do nowadays, whether you agree with them or not, they always try to spin it that it's to protect this, it's to protect that, the hin with the hair, I don't know. Anyway, but what else do they do? By Shivu Prusdois Aladrachim. They sit down to the Board of Health to check everybody's vaccine passports before they were able to go anywhere. Kederech Shahoshiv Yerovim ben Avat, like Yerovim ben Avated, Shalayalu Yisrael Rega. So this line in the Gemara blows everything out of the water. You can have all your pretexts and all your hakachinics. We compare it to what Yerovim ben Avated, Shalayalu Yisrael Rega.
He also had pretexts, I'm sure.
Ma'asu. So Ma'asu Ksherin. Shaboy Sador V'Yirachet. What are the people who wanted? So instead of calling them wild, reckless people, the Gemara refers to them as Ksherim Shaboy Sador V'Yirachet. The reason why it's in brackets is because YouTube censored this compliment to them because they were using alternative means to get around what they felt were unjust gzeres. So what they did was Heviu Sali Bikurim. They brought baskets of Bikurim, but on the top layer, V'chibum B'ktzios, they covered them over with dried figs. Dried figs need to be processed into igulei dvela. They have to be pressed into barrels to be made into those wheels. And I guess the refineries were in Yerushalayim. So the Notlum, the Eliel Kasvein, they took a basket that the top layer at least was dried figs. They took the tool with them, the pestle, which is the tool with them that they're going to use to crush the figs. So they also created a pretext as if that's what they were doing. The Kivan Shegiu Etzel Prisdois, when they got to the guards, they asked them, where are you going? They told them, you know there's a do-it-yourself fig pressing facility down the road. You see, we came with our do-it-yourself tools and our supplies. And that's what we're going to do. Kivin Shavru, man. Once they passed the guards, they passed the customs. Itrum Bisalim, they put the Bikurim into beautiful baskets. They vium Yerushalayim, and they brought them as Bikurim to Yerushalayim. So this is an example of an unjust gzeira that the Goyim made that was getting in the way of our avodas Hashem, and the Yirei Chet and the Kshem Shuvay Sedar did something that people could say it's dishonest. It's dishonest, but they did it anyway. So this opens up a huge question. That's what I wanted to focus on, not on the validity of the vaccines, but I like getting into any controversy anyway. That is it right? Are you allowed to lie to the government if they're making restrictions that are unjust?
If the general applicable to everybody and is not specific to one group, main application something applicable to everybody, but not that either one is specific to one group, that is
So the doctor wants to say that the doctor wants to give an example of what's the litmus test if it's unjust. If it's targeted at a specific group, then you can call it unjust. If it's not targeted at a specific group, it's for everybody, it's just. That's fine, but that's not my discussion. Once you determine it is unjust, let's say you determine, even according to your standards, it's unjust. Are you allowed to lie? Maybe you're still not allowed to lie. That's my question. Even if it is unjust, can you move back? I want to see the doctor. Yeah, but that's not the discussion. I agree with you.
Basically, anybody going through a red light, okay, will be ticketed, okay? And people around and say, it's the Jews, because the Jews also go through a red light. Okay? So then you're basically weakening your argument when it is a specific.
I'm asking 100%. That's what I wanted to bring up from the Gemara. The Gemara seems to say that the Ksherim felt you were allowed to lie. I know today there are poskim who hold you're not allowed to lie. Even if you hold it's unjust, you're still not allowed to lie. So that's the shaila. Whether it's unjust or not is a different story. Like retroactively, we know that the restrictions put on the schools in New York were unjust, and they were based on anti-Semitism, even though at the time people were saying it was to protect them. But that's not part of this discussion. That's just to rev up the oil. I want to once you determine it is unjust, and maybe I'm not making any determination on what's just and what's not. But if something is determined as unjust, are you allowed to lie? So it seems from the Gemara here that they used alternative methods, or maybe they weren't lying. Maybe they actually did go to press some figs, but they also went to do bikurim. We don't know that they didn't do the figs. Maybe they didn't.
What would happen if they do make a law, the Malchus does make a law that affects everybody, right? It affects everybody, but it affects our Yiddishkeit.
I hear. I don't know. So this is that's not the point that I want to bring out from our Gemara. Our Gemara is lying but halal an option, and I don't know from the Gemara that it's an option.
Why don't you know?
Because maybe they didn't lie. Maybe they did that. They went to do bikurim. Maybe they also went to press their figs. Nobody knows that they didn't do it.
Yeah, but they hid it. They hid the stuff.
They didn't lie. Okay, let's come back to it. Okay. Oh, Zog the Gemara. Very good. Zog the Hele Gemara weiter.
Could you use a mitzvah?
Right.
Religious symbols.
Here. Okay, so Amr Lahem, Lechmat, Alchan Amam Lachish Negel Vela, Bemachtash Shalvenu, Ubela Shalvenu, Kivin Shabam Ijim Salam Bimu Shlan. Tana, Heinen Bnei Salmoi Hanetufsi. These are also the people who we call Salmoi Hanetufsi, the latter smugglers. This is the story with Chavchi tells me about a guy who used to cross the border every day with a wheelbarrow full of sand, and after a week, the guy says, and they would check the sand to see if there's any diamonds in there, because someone's looking for sand. So finally, after a week, the customs guy says, I know you're smuggling something, but what are you smuggling? He says, I'm smuggling wheelbarrows. Right? So the Gemara is as follows. Tell me about Ma Hein B'nei Salmoy. Who are these people? Amru, the same story. Pamachas Gozer HaMalchus Gzer Al Yisrael. Again, the Malchus were Gozer Gzer Shalo Yaviu Eitzim LaMaracha. They shouldn't bring wood to the Maracha. V'Yishivu Presdois Al. They needed very high quality wood without any worms. It had to be perfect wood. So they needed a pretext. They couldn't just bring wood out of any type of wood that it takes for construction, because the quality wood that they were going to bring was so evident that it wasn't for general construction. They had to find some pretext to get this high quality wood in. So they took their very high quality wood that would be royu to be used on the mizbeach. They made wood. They made ladders. Ladders are always built out of the highest quality wood. You know why? Because you don't want to fall off. So ladders are always the highest quality wood. So the only pretext they could find to justify bringing in the highest quality wood is bringing ladders. So when the guy asked him, "What are you smuggling in?" He says, "I'm not smuggling in ladders. I'm smuggling in the wood." Right? And they put their ladders on their shoulders.
Another reason why ladders are good. Ladders are good because they got a bunch of little steps. They don't have to be cut up again.
Oh, very good. So Chaim Tzvi likes the idea of ladders. Again, when they got to the customs, there's chicken coops there. We're going to get birds. They passed customs, they took them apart, and they went to Yerushalayim. The Alei and Valkayotze Behem on Dutch people who are Moshe Nefesh for Yiddishkeit. Omer Zecher Tzadik Levracha Al Yeravim Ben Nevat VeChaveir of Nemar B'Shem Rishon Yirkov. Shlomo Miller. Right. That's right. I remember the Rav didn't allow shiurim in the Besmerish at that time, so we decided that we're going to learn anyway. And if the Rav comes in, we'll spin the dreidel. Zok the
Dina de
Gemara.
Malchusa Dina that the Shlomo said is not comparable to me in my head because Dina de Malchusa Dina in Eretz Yisrael, they got no right to tell us what to do in Eretz Yisrael. But here we're in both.
I hear-
So they have a right to tell us to do in both.
These are all things we have to leave up to our bottom. I was just trying to bring up an interesting conversation, but Takaloch, I don't know. I mean, I've heard different opinions. Zok the Gemara. The Esrim boy b'nei Pachas Moy ben Yehuda. Zok the Heilige Mishnah. Zok the Heilige Gemara brings a price. Tana b'nei Pachas Moy ben Yehuda. Who are b'nei Pachas Moy ben Yehuda? Hein b'nei David ben Yehuda. These are the same family as b'nei David ben Yehuda. And the Rashi says the reason why it's called Moav is because David came out of Rosh HaMoaviyah. And that's why the name Moav is there. Actually, somebody asked me a couple of days ago, why would someone put the name Moav in their name? The answer is if you're like any color of Rosh, you put that in your name. Diver Reb Meir, Reb Yosy Amar Hainin ben Yoyev ben in the reverse, it's the same machlokes again. The Echad b'Teves, Shavu b'nei Parish Shnia. The b'nei Parish came around a second time. Correct Gemara, this doesn't make any sense. Manu masnis, lo Rab Meir, lo Rab Yehuda, lo Rab Yosy. This will not fit in, not according to Rab Meir, not according to Rab Yehuda, and not according to Rab Yosy. Why is that? Because they all learn that these people are al b'nei David. Rab Meir, listening Shavu b'nei David ben Yehuda, Shnia, because that's who all these people were, according to Reb Meir. Rabbi Yehuda, listening Shavu b'nei David ben Yehuda Shnia. It should also say, also say Shavu b'nei David ben Yehuda, because he also learns that these were the mashpach of David ben Yehuda. And Rabbi Yosy, listening Shavu b'nei Yoav ben Tzuriyah Shnia. It should say that the b'nei Yoav ben Tzuriyah, because that's who the family is. So Gemara Leilam Rabbi Yosy. Really, it's Rabbi Yosy. There's a machlokes according to Rabbi Yosy if this family was b'nei Yoav ben Tzuriyah or if it was b'nei Yehuda. And that's why the Mishnah says Shavu b'nei Parish Shnia, because it would have been a different family from the family of Yoav ben Tzuriyah. On Rosh Chodesh Tevis, there was no Maimed because it was a fully loaded day. There was Halal, there was Musaf, and there was Korban Eitzim. Amar le Markashisha b'rei Rav Chisda Rav Ashi. Markashisha, the son of Rav Chisda, told Rav Ashi, Maishna, what's the difference? Halal, the Dachidi day. Halal is doiche to my mother's by Shachris. Umayshna Musaf, the loy Dachidi day. Musaf does not doiche to my mother's of Musaf. Rather, Musaf is doiche to my mother's of Mincha or Ne'ilah. Amar le Rav Ashi, Hashta, you're wrong. Hashta the lavdi day dachi. If it's doiche to my mother's by Mincha, the day like Kolshagain, surely it will also be doiche to my mother's of Musaf itself. So in fact, it is doiche to my mother's of Musaf. Amar le hachi kamin lach. This is my question. I agree with what you're saying that it should be doiche both. But my question is, why do we say that if there's a korban musaf, it's doiche to my mother's of Ne'ilah of Mincha? Why don't we just say it's doiche to my mother's of musaf? Why does it reach out and doiche my mother's for a later tefillah? Amar le, you have a very good point, because in fact, Ika Rabbi Yosy the Kavasach. Rabbi Yosy agrees with you that it's only doiche to my mother's of musaf. The Tanya Rabbi Yosy Omer, Kol Yom sheyesh bei musaf, any day that has a musaf, yesh boy maimed. We'll have a maimed. So what does it mean? It'll have a maimed. Where will there be a maimed? Where exactly does Rabbi Yosy mean there will be a maimed even though there was musaf? Maimed amai. Ilema maimed the shachris. If in a day of musaf we say there's a maimed of shachris, ha Tanakama nami hachik amar. The Tanakama agrees to that. So that's not a new halacha that Rabbi Yosy is saying. Ella maimed the musaf. It must be that it's the Maimed of Musaf. Even though there's Musaf that day, you say the Maimed of Musaf. Fragt Gemara, the day Nami Dachi, of course it should be Doiche, its own Maimed. You have to say it's Doiche, its own. Ella, the Mincha. When Rabbi Yosy said, Kol Yom Sheish Bei Musaf, it means that it will not be Doiche, Mincha. Fragt Gemara, what do you mean? What do you mean? Korban Eitzim Dachi. Korban Eitzim is going to be Doiche, the mincha anyway, like we saw earlier. Ella lav the ne'ilah. It must be that Rabbi Yosy is referring to ne'ilah, and he's saying that a day that there's a musaf, it'll be doicha the musaf, but it won't be doicha the ne'ilah. Shmamine di day dachi. You see that Rabbi Yosy holds that when there's a day of musaf, you don't say my mother's by musaf. The lavdi day loy dachi. But another tefillah such as ne'ilah, it will not be doicha the my mother's of the ne'ilah. Shmamina. So we see this svara that ne'ilah, that musaf will be doicha its own my mother's, but it won't be doicha the my mother's of a different tefillah. Prektimara, the listening nami, the echad b'nisin, lo hoya b'maimed. Why did the Mishnah just list off that on the first day of Teves, there's no maimed because of the carbon eitzim and because of the musaf? Why doesn't it also say the echad b'nisan? Why? If yesh by halal, there's also halal by Rosh Chodesh Nisan, which would eliminate the my mother's by Shachris. It has a musaf because it's Rosh Chodesh, so that should eliminate the my mother's by musaf. And according to our Mishnah by Mincha as well, the carbonatum are doicha the ne'ilah or the Mincha in this case. I don't know if there's ne'ilah on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, or if they're my mother's. Of course, it would be. So it's doicha the ne'ilah. So why doesn't it list off Rosh Chodesh Nisan also as a day where all of the my mothers are eliminated, just like the Mishnah listed off Rosh Chodesh Teves is a day where there's no my mother's? Amarava Zoy Semeres Halela de Beresh Yarcha Lav Deraisa. Halal that we say on Rosh Chodesh is not midaraisa. Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yotzadok Shmoina Esor Yom B'Shana. There's only 18 days during the year. Yochad Gomer ben Halal. A Yochad Gomer Halal meaning it's a deraisa. Ve'elohein. These are the days. Shmoina Shemei Achad. The 8 days of Sukkot, and that's because every day of Sukkot has a different carbon, so it's like its own Yom Tov. U'Shmoina Shemei Chanukah. The 8 days of Chanukah. The Yom Tov again because on Chanukah every day was a Bazunder and Nes. The Yom Tov Rishon Shal Pesach. The first day of Pesach only, not the rest of Pesach. The Yom Tov Rishon Shel Atzeres, the first day of Shavuos. Uva Goyla, there's 3 extra days because of our Sveika. The Yom is Esrim Vechajay, 21 days. Ve'elohen, Tishas Yimei Achad, U'Shmoynes Yimei Chanukah, U'Shnei Yomim HaRishon Shel Pesach, U'Veiz Yomim Tovim Shel Atzeres. So this actually is a huge shaila, because since Halal on Rosh Chodesh is not a Raisa, do you make a bracha on Halal that we say in Rosh Chodesh? It's actually Machlokes Rishonim. The Rambam holds you don't make a bracha, and the Ramah holds you do make a bracha. We make a bracha, but the Svardim actually do not make a bracha on Halal that they say in Rosh Chodesh. They only make a bracha when they say the whole Halal. Rav Ikloi Lebavel. Rav showed up to Bavel. Chazinu, he saw the Kakari Halila B'Reish Yarcha. He saw that they were saying Halal. Savar La'afsakinu. He wanted to stop them. Kivan the Chazah, the Kamadalgi, the Lugay. Since he saw that they were not saying the halal, Amar, he said, Shmami no minig, I was saying b'yadayim, it's just a minig, and they're not really saying the halal by Raisa. He was trying to bring a raya from this story, in fact, that they must have said a bracha, because if they didn't say a bracha right at the beginning, he should have already known that it was not the real halal. He only noticed it when they were medal did the lugit. But as soon as they started, they didn't make a bracha, he would have known that it was a minig.
Why don't we just say that that's the reason why he got upset? The reason why he got upset is because they were saying a bracha. Had they not said a bracha, he wouldn't have gotten upset.
That's exactly what some of the Rishonim want to learn. You have a right, you have to say a bracha, even though you're saying half a halal, which is what we do.
If they said a bracha.
Yeah, they must have said a bracha.
That's why
Otherwise,
he got upset.
that's right.
So why,
That's right.
question, why do we say a bracha? A lot of times it's not, you should.
Well, sometimes you shouldn't make a bracha.
No.
The Bible
That's
should-
Ramein. You do not say that.
Oh, they don't. For what we we make a lot of brachas on the husband. We make brachas on the husband.
The Lubavitchers are consistent. They have the Meira of the Rambam, and they have the Rosh Chodesh of the Halal of the Rambam.
Zokti more weiter. We have to finish up. Tana. Yochid lo yasku. A yochid should not start in hischil goimer. Rashi says yochid klemer filu yochid goimer b'henis hahal. Even a yochid could finish hal. Shekol echad ve'echad chayiv ligmer b'henis hal. The first mashna the goimer kol yimei chag. Okay, that we spoke out of it. So even a yochid on a day where you mechuyev to say the whole halal, a yochid shouldn't say the whole halal, but if he started, he should finish. Okay, Zok to Gemara weiter. Zok to Gemara weiter. Hey, Devarim Iris Avishenu B'Shiva Asher B'Tanis. 5 terrible things happened on Shabbat B'Tanis. Hey, Nishtabra Luchas, we know, and how do we know? The Tanya, the Shisha Lachodesh Nitnu Aseres Adibros Yisrael. The Aseres Adibros was on the 6th day of Sivan. Yosy Amar B'Shiva Boy was actually on the 7th day of Sivan. Now, what's a given, without a doubt, is that Moshe went up for 40 days to the Har Sinai on the 7th day. The question is, did he go up the day after the Aseres Adibros or the day of Aseres Adibros? Man Amar B'Shisha Nitnu Ub'Shiva Ala Moshe. On day 6 of Sivan was the Aseres Adibros, and on day 7, Moshe went up to Har Sinai. Man Amar B'Shiva Nitnu Ub'Shiva Ala. So it's not disputed that on the 7th day of Sivan, Moshe Rabbeinu went up. So that's very, very clear. So if we know for a fact that Moshe Rabbeinu went up on the 7th day of Sivan, that's 40 days, and on the 7th day of Tammuz, the Shabbos of Tammuz, and Shabbos of Tammuz, Nochis also, that's when Moshe Rabbeinu came down. And we know the day he came down from Har Sinai is the day that he broke the luchos. It says, so that's how we know Shavuos of Tammuz was the date that the luchos were broken. But how do we know that? Gemara, that we know from Kabbalah. We know our parents and grandparents told us that it occurred on that day. The city was breached. The Yud Hava was on the 7th day. How can we say that? We learned that it was on the 9th day. And this is referring to the first base of Mikdash. During the first base of Mikdash, the city was breached on the 9th day of Tammuz, not on Shavuos of Tammuz. By the first base of Mikdash, it was on the 7th day. It was on the 9th day of Tammuz. Second base of Mikdash was Yud Zayin. So why do we fast for Yud Zayin? So there's difference of opinions. One opinion is we're suffering today because of Shavuos of Tammuz, because we're still suffering from the second base of Mikdash Chorban. But the other reason they say is the first base of Mikdash was Charev because of Avodah Zarah. The second base of Mikdash was Charev because of Sinas Chinam. When we fast, we're doing tshuva for the Averis. So we have to do tshuva for the Aver of Sinas Chinam, not for the Aver of Avodah Zarah, because Avodah Zarah wasn't relevant anymore. The second base of Mikdash. The time we learned, and then another thing that happened is Sarah Pustamus is a Torah. How do we know that? Gemara, that's handed down from generation to generation. That was the date. From the time that the Talmud stopped, the law says Shikot Shoiming. So the same day that the Talmud was stopped was the day as well that the Tzelem was put in the Hechel. It was only one Tzelem. There's only one Avodah Zarah. It's mashma that it was more than one getchke. Amarava, you're right. There were two getchkes, but they got into a fight. Trey Hava, v'nofel chad al chavre. One getchke, Hashem Erenesh, should fall on the other one, the tovri liyadei, and cut off the hand of the second getchke. Yishtakach tavaksiv, and that stems with the pasuk. And Tzavis l'cheruve beisa, you wanted to be machrib the Beis Hamikdash. Yotcha ashlim shlei. Your hand paid for it, and that's why your hand was cut off. I'm sorry for the coughing. Okay, let's stop here. Have a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos. And Misham Shabbos again. We're going to learn 45 minutes before Mincha, and we're going to learn Misham Shabbos at 7:30, and that will be on Zoom. We'll be right over here in this room. Kavaltik.
Ladders of deception.
Okay.
Have you ever
Good luck.
heard the story of
I'm sorry.
Remember the famous story of wood with the true laser of Rothschild?